After his descent to Earth's deepest point, James Cameron described the seafloor as lunar, very isolated. A vast, black, unknown expanse. For a while, that account reinforced our idea of the abyss as a sterile, lifeless void, crushed under impossible pressure. But that idea is wrong. Recently recovered transmissions from the Hadal zone suggest his submersible was not alone. To grasp what those signals imply, you first have to understand the arena itself, an anomaly of geology so immense, so violently deep, it violates conventional scale. This geological anomaly has a name, whispered like a diagnosis: the Mariana Trench. When surveyors first charted it in the late 19th century, their instruments showed an extreme reading that looked like an error. A gash in the seafloor, the crust itself torn open. Today, we map it with satellites and submersibles, and it resolves into a scar over 2,000 kilometers long, slashed across the Pacific. At its nadir, Challenger Deep, the seafloor falls away to nearly 11 kilometers. Past the last trace of sunlight, into an absolute, unbroken darkness where, if something watched you, would you ever know it was there? To begin to grasp that scale, we have to set it against something familiar. If you lowered Mount Everest into this trench, its summit would vanish, still buried under more than 2 kilometers of water. From that submerged peak to you at the surface, the distance would exceed what separates most commercial airliners from the ground. But size, for all its shock value, isn't the most terrifying aspect of this anomaly. The horror here? The condition that dictates the rules of existence for anything that descends, is the pressure. An unimaginable, crushing weight, a force pressing in from every direction. And that is what we're about to confront. To comprehend this force, you must visualize it. At the bottom of the trench, the pressure exceeds 1,000 atmospheres, a crushing load equal to placing the weight of a jumbo jet onto a single coin. This is the barrier, the threshold where engineering starts to look fragile. And yet, in 1960, 2 men attempted to breach it. Their vessel was the submersible Trieste, a primitive steel sphere lowered blindly into the abyss. As they descended, the world outside dissolved into absolute blackness. The submersible began to groan, the structure protesting under a weight it was never truly designed to bear. Then, at a depth of 9 kilometers, still 2 kilometers from the bottom, a violent crack echoed through the cabin, a catastrophic structural failure. A viewport had fractured under the strain. By any sane logic, they should have aborted. They did not. They pushed on. While they survived the ordeal, the sheer terror of that moment served as a warning to the rest of humanity. The next manned dive to that depth would not happen for over 50 years. Not until after we had explored the surface of the moon and of Mars. The ocean had shown us its power, and we retreated. So the question is, what lies in the zones that even this pressure cannot sterilize, in pockets where life persists as an anomaly against the void? To understand that, we must make the descent ourselves. Our journey begins where all life as we know it does, at the sunlit surface. In these upper layers, endless fields of phytoplankton photosynthesize, generating nearly half of the oxygen on this planet. Up here, everything runs on a familiar kind of energy. Then we descend. The bright blue above us thickens to indigo, then collapses into a permanent midnight. We leave the sun behind. Its last rays die against the hull of the submersible. At 200 meters, we cross an invisible boundary into the mesopelagic, the Twilight zone. Here, the dominant language is not spoken, it's emitted in cold, living light. This is the realm of bioluminescence. To endure, life twists itself into strange, efficient forms. Eyes swell to monstrous sizes, straining to catch the final dying photons. Bodies turn gelatinous, nearly transparent. Ghosts suspended in the water column, hiding in plain sight. This is the hunting ground of the anglerfish, a disturbingly familiar anomaly, dangling a phosphorescent lure to draw the curious straight into its needle-toothed maw. It is one of countless unexplained light signatures that bloom for a moment, then evaporate back into the void. And yet, for all its alien spectacle, this world still obeys a logic we can recognize. There is, nevertheless, a deeper boundary. Far below, past 6,000 meters, we cross into what is formally classified as the Hadal zone. And here, the established principles of biology do not merely bend, they fracture. This fracture begins with the environment itself. Once our submersible slips past 6,000 meters, we cross into the Hadal zone, a domain named after the underworld of Greek myth. The name is not poetic, it's literal. Down here, the temperature locks into a constant, near-freezing cold. The darkness isn't just an absence of light. It feels absolute, like a physical presence that has persisted for eons. And the pressure. Human intuition just fails. The water above you carries the mass of an entire skyscraper, pressing down on every single square inch of your body. By any sane logic, a place like this should be sterile, a void. Yet the footage says otherwise. Where we expected nothing, we found life. And not frail, microscopic life, but paradoxically large forms. Giant amphipods, relatives of the common sandhopper, scavenger crustaceans, swollen to monstrous sizes in the crushing black. We see the Mariana snailfish, a ghostly, gelatinous creature thriving at depths that would turn bone to powder. An animal that seems almost without substance, yet it stands as the apex predator of this abyss. And around it, colonies of boneless worms, surviving on chemical whispers that leak from the seafloor. But the most profound violation of biological law is this anomaly, the xenophiophore. It is a single-celled organism, an amoeba. Yet in this environment, it grows to the size of a soccer ball, a solitary cell larger than a human brain, thriving in eternal cold under impossible pressure. It's tempting to treat these entities as isolated miracles, lonely, desperate survivors, clinging to existence against all odds. You might even feel a kind of pity, but that reaction is a fundamental misinterpretation of what you are seeing. That is not what they are at all. So if they are not survivors, what are they? They are signals, data points in a pattern we're only now starting to see. For decades, oceanographers treated the Hadal zone as a biological desert, an abyssal dead end. That assumption has been dismantled. In 2025, a series of findings from the Mariana Trench Ecology Research Project, published in the journal Cell, laid out a radical new truth. The analysis was blunt. It identified over 7,500 new microbial genomes packed into a pressure-crushed water column. Nearly 90% of them were previously unknown to science. This is not a barren wasteland. It is a kingdom, operating on principles we are only beginning to decipher. But the anomaly deepens. A concurrent study, published in Nature, confirmed something on a different scale. Not just microbes, but complex, thriving animal communities. Vast fields of ciboglinid tubeworms and dense colonies of clams, flourishing in absolute darkness and crushing pressure. Their existence is not powered by the sun. There is no day down here. It is sustained by chemical energy seeping from the planet's crust, a slow leak of geologic power. A completely alien foundation for life, still unexplained. What you are witnessing in these submersible recordings is not a collection of isolated miracles. It is a functioning, active biosphere, a hidden world that has evolved in isolation for eons, governed by its own unforgiving laws, And yet all of this, these thousands of new species, these entire ecosystems, were documented in an infinitesimally small fraction of the trench. We are staring at this world through a keyhole. So it forces a quieter, darker question. If these are the things crawling near the light of our intrusion, what colossal ancient forms deliberately avoid it, lurking in the true, unobserved dark? That final question hangs in the silence, heavy, unanswered. The notion of colossal forms deliberately evading our light. The implications of the data we have reviewed are profoundly disturbing. What has been cataloged is not a collection of isolated survivors. We are observing fragments of a vast subterranean biosphere, a hidden kingdom. If you want to comprehend the scale of our ignorance, consider this verifiable statement. The abyssal plains of our own world are less explored than the surface of the moon. Data from projects like Seabed 2030 confirm we possess more detailed maps of Mars than we do of our own planet's deepest domains. This returns us to the precipice. If this much biodiversity, this much alien complexity, can flourish in the infinitesimal fraction of the trench our instruments and submersibles have managed to penetrate, what entities of incomprehensible scale and antiquity persist in the crushing, absolute darkness just beyond our surveillance? Tell us what you believe is waiting in the unobserved dark. To continue this descent into forbidden knowledge, subscribe and activate the signal. There is always more to observe.